Where would professional wrestling be without championships? If you're gonna have people pretend to fight each other, then they may as well be doing it for a pretend title belt. These shiny pants holder-uppers have been the focal point of some of the industry's greatest moments, as well as shifting millions of dollars worth of merch. WWE currently has 14 active championships if you include NXT, but its past is filled with titles that have come and gone. Today we will be looking at the ones that came and went in the shortest amount of time. Just a note, we are counting a title's lifespan from when it was first won to when it was officially deactivated. We are also including its entire history, rather than just the time it was in WWE, so no WCW or ECW title on here. Got all that? Good, because I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 shortest-lived championships in WWE history. Join us. Number 10, the NXT United Kingdom Championship, 5 years, 8 months, and 20 days. In January of 2017, British wrestling fans were given a right old treat when WWE put on its first ever United Kingdom Championship tournament. This two-night event ended with Tyler Bate defeating Pete Dunne to become the company's first ever UK champ. At the age of 19 years old, by the way. Disgusting behaviour, honestly. Sadly, what started out as brightly as the Blackpool Illuminations fizzled out faster than you could say, "Hey up, Chuck." Bate and Dunne had a great rematch at NXT TakeOver Chicago, but after Dunne won the title, the belt just sort of disappeared. The Bruiserweight was champion for a mammoth 685 days, before dropping the belt to Volta, who held it for an even more impressive 870 days. Yet, in all that time, the title got about as much exposure as we Brits get to sunlight. It didn't help that NXT UK didn't start up until over a year after the belt was formed, and even when it did exist, hardly anybody actually watched it. In the end, two-time champion Bate lost a unification match to Bron Breakker in 2022 to retire the title after less than 6 years in existence. A sad end for this most royal and beautiful of championships. Number 9, the WWF European Championship, 5 years, 4 months, and 26 days. The fact that the WWE UK title lasted 4 months longer than the WWE European title will no doubt give some Brexiteers a great deal of joy. On February 26, 1997, the British Bulldog defeated Owen Hart in a tournament final to be crowned WWE's first ever European champion. Over the next 5+ years, the title became something for lower mid-carders to fight over when they had nothing else to do. Though the likes of Shawn Michaels and Triple H held it, the title is most famously associated with people such as D'Lo Brown, X-Pac, Shane McMahon, and Mideon, who won the title by finding it in a bag. How prestigious. The championship eventually bit the dust on the July 22, 2002 edition of Raw, when Rob Van Dam beats Jeff Hardy in a ladder match to unify it with his own Intercontinental belt. It was a nice idea while it lasted, but this was definitely a championship with a limited shelf life. Also, only 2 of its holders were actually European, so yeah, kinda failed the mission statement there. Number 8, the NXT Cruiserweight Championship, 5 years, 3 months, and 22 days. Another short-lived title, another tournament started by Triple H. Sensing a theme here? The Cruiserweight Classic was a fantastic summer-long series of matches that enthralled indie wrestling nerds like myself in 2016. WWE presented us with some of the greatest performers under 205 pounds from across the globe, including the likes of Zack Sabre Jr., Kota Ibushi, and everyone's favourite, Kenneth Johnson, a hero to us all. TJ Perkins won the whole thing, and the newly minted WWE Cruiserweight title. This was a different belt to the old Cruiserweight Championship before you come at us in the comments. After a disastrous attempt to get the division over on Raw, the Cruiserweights were eventually shunted down to NXT. Then, after flailing around down there for a bit, the belt was unified with Carmelo Hayes' North American title when he beats Roderick Strong at New Year's Evil 2022. Despite only existing for the lifespan of your average hamster, the belt was held by some pretty big names. You had Neville, Rich Swann, Kushida, Enzo Amore... Loads of big names. Brian Kendrick. Oh, this title was held by some big names. Number 7, the NXT UK Women's Championship, 4 years and 9 days. Many sources state that this title came into existence on June 18th, 2018, but this is wrong. That is the date it was announced, not the date it was first won. That, dear viewers, was the episode of NXT UK taped on the 26th August 2018, when Rhea Ripley beat Toni Storm to win a tournament. Ah yes, Rhea Ripley and Toni Storm, those two famously British wrestlers. In fact, only one of the 4 women to hold the NXT UK Women's Championship was actually born in Blighty. You heard me right, only 4 different people officially held this belt. Ripley lost it to Storm at TakeOver Blackpool, who lost it to Kaylee Ray, now Alba Fire, at TakeOver Cardiff, who lost it to Meiko Satomura during the time vortex known as the Pandemic. And that is it. Mandy Rose unifying the titles at Worlds Collide 2022 does not count as her holding the belt. 4 different champions, 4 years. Sadly, this title suffered from a lack of exposure. Whilst its male counterpart was featured on the American NXT a few times, this one resided solely on NXT UK. And let's face it, you could count the number of viewers that show had on one hand. Post-amputation. Number 6, the WWF Hardcore Championship, 3 years, 9 months and 25 days. Of all the championships on this list, few, if any, are as fondly remembered as the Hardcore title. Gifted to Mick Foley as a thank you for knocking his brains out in the service of entertainment, the Hardcore title would then bounce around between the likes of Al Snow, Big Boss Man, and Hardcore Holly. It wasn't until Bob Corr's cousin Crash got the belt in February of 2000 that its most famous caveat was introduced, the 24/7 rule. This meant that the championship could now be defended at any time and in any place that had a referee present, which led to some of the funniest moments in WWE history. Crash defending the title in a bull pit, Mighty Molly winning it off the Hurricane by thwacking him with a frying pan, Gerald Briscoe pinning a sleeping Crash to win the gold. WWE don't always do comedy right, but when they do, it's fantastic. And this was. After 240 reigns shared between 52 wrestlers, the beloved belt said its last goodbye after Rob Van Dam beat Tommy Dreamer on an August 2002 episode of Raw. If you're playing along at home, that's 2 championships that RVD has killed now. Cool, as he would say. Number 5, the NXT UK Tag Team Championships, 3 years, 7 months and 28 days. On the same night that the NXT UK Women's Championship went down the toilet, the brand's tag team titles also went the way of the dodo. Champions Brooks Jensen and Josh Briggs were competing in a fatal 4-way for both the NXT and NXT UK tag straps. That match was won by Pretty Deadly, who became the NXT Tag Team Champions and retired the UK versions in the process. Yes, boys. The British tag belts were first won by the grizzled young veterans at NXT UK TakeOver Blackpool in January of 2019. Despite existing for 3 months less than the NXT UK Women's title, these championships had almost double the number of holders and even managed to fit a vacancy in there too. Moustache Mountain, Gallus, the aforementioned Pretty Deadly, they all held the belts until time was called on the NXT UK experiment. These titles suffered from the same lack of prominence that plagued NXT UK, despite plenty of excellent wrestlers competing for them in plenty of excellent matches. Maybe their lineage will be revived when NXT Europe gets off the ground. If it gets off the ground. Number 4, the WWE 24/7 Championship, 3 years, 5 months and 20 days. You ever see those DVDs in supermarkets that are clearly meant to look like popular films, even though they're just a cheap rip-off? That is what the 24/7 Championship was to the Hardcore title. The chop kick panda to the Hardcore's Kung Fu panda, the 24/7 title was introduced by Mick Foley on the May 20th, 2019 edition of Raw. After Titus O'Neil, of all people, became the first champion, the belt fell into the hands of its most famous owner, R-Truth. Truth held the hideous olive green wart for a combined total of 423 days across a maddening 53 different reigns. By the way, that technically gives the former K-Quick more title reigns than anyone else in WWE history. Fair play, much deserved. Whilst a good idea to begin with, the 24/7 title became more of a hindrance to WWE programming over time. The company ran out of good ideas very quickly, despite occasionally great input from the likes of Truth, Akira Tozawa, and Drake Maverick. The title was binned by Nikki Cross almost as soon as Triple H took over creative. Well, it was nearly binned. Number 3, the WWF North American Heavyweight Championship. 2 years, 1 month, and 8 days. The first of our old-timey oddity championships now, and one very few modern wrestling fans will have heard of. Before he was accused of defrauding the state of Mississippi, Ted DiBiase was a respected name in the world of pro wrestling. The nickname $1 Million Man has a whole different meaning now, doesn't it? DiBiase first signed for WWE back in 1979 and was immediately given a title belt upon his arrival. This was the WWF North American Heavyweight Championship, and Ted would carry it for 126 days before losing it to Pat Patterson thanks to some brass knuckles. Patterson in turn lost it to Japanese wrestler Seiji Sakaguchi, who held it for 532 days before the company completely gave up on the belt in 1981. It may have only existed for a little over 2 years, but this championship is actually pivotal to the history of WWE. Whilst holding the belt, Pat Patterson won a fictional tournament in Rio de Janeiro to unify it with the equally made-up South American Heavyweight Championship. And thus, the Intercontinental Championship was born. Number 2, the WWF Intercontinental Tag Team Championships, 5 months and 25 days. A sloth's pregnancy cycle is roughly 6 months long. Why am I mentioning this? Well, A, because I love sloths, who doesn't? And B, because that means a baby sloth is gestating for longer than the WWF Intercontinental Tag Team Championships were a thing. Information about these belts is scarce, but WWE's official website does have a small piece on them. According to WWE.com, the championships were never defended in the United States. Instead, they were created as part of a working relationship between the company and Japanese promotion, the Universal Wrestling Federation. In January of 1991, the gold was handed over to Mexican performer Perro Aguayo and Japanese wrestler Gran Hamada. However, these two would become the only holders of the titles as the partnership between the WWF and UWF ended later that year. Number 1, the WWF Canadian Championship, 5 months and 5 days. Though he's more famous now for probably being whacked by the mob, Canadian wrestler Dino Bravo was quite the sensation back in the day. To capitalise on his popularity, WWE awarded Dino the Canadian Championship in August of 1985. Details on how often the championship was actually defended are spotty to say the least, but we do know that the belt was vacated after just 5 months and 5 days when Bravo left the company in early 1986. When the strongman returned later that year, the title did not return with him. That makes our boy Dino the first, last, and only person to hold this fabled piece of WWE history. Wrestling might seem like the Wild West now, but it was off the scale in the 80s. Stuff happened all the time, and nobody was really there to properly document it, so all sorts of wacky titles could have been created and uncreated in the space of a week. However, we have to go with what we know, so please join me in awarding the WWF Canadian Championship with the shortest-lived championship, and let us never speak of it again.